Hi there and welcome to the Project Corner. Today I'm going to look into 3 Gantt chart visuals in Power BI based on my Project Online. Now in a previous video I shared 2 Gantt chart visuals in Power BI, and because Power BI is a growing application and custom visuals can be created by just about anyone, there are 3 additional visuals that I want to share today. So I've done a lot of customization on my environment before this video could be made. Some of the changes that I've done is I changed a number of custom fields. I added data, a lot of data. So for instance, we now have a phase 1, phase 2 and phase 3 complete data field, as well as a commercial deadline. And I set baselines for each and every one of my projects, making some slip compared to the original baseline and some even chasing that. So this is the Project Online environment, and I'm using the template that also contains project for the web data. But because I haven't configured that part of the solution that much, I'm going to mainly focus on the Project Online side of the content. So let's head on over to the Power BI. And once again, if you are a member of the newsletter subscription, you get access to this file. So what you see here is the data that is in my Project Online and Project for the Web content. And these are the 3 Gantt charts that I'm going to look into. I'm going to look into the Gantt chart by Lingaro. I'm going to look at S timeline, and of course the Gantt chart by xViz, which is by far the most extensive Gantt chart visual that you'll find on Power BI at the moment, which has its pros and its cons, obviously. But we'll get to that in the end. So how do you get the visuals? Well, you press those 3 little ellipsis dots and you'll go to the get more visuals. It's not going to be called a marketplace anymore. It's just going to be get visuals. And once that page is loaded, I'll click on Gantt. And previously there were just these 3 values, and now you see that a whole lot has been added. So previously we've had a look at these 2, and now we're going to look at these 3 as well, and maybe in the future there's going to be another addition. So if you don't have these visuals yet in your Power BI file, just click on one of those and click on add, and that visual will be added to your custom list of visuals. Lovely static there. We're not going to create it like that, don't worry. So first up, Gantt chart by Lingaro, and this is a very nice little visual. I put a little link to their website here, and let's get started. So Gantt chart by Lingaro. I click on it, and I'm going to drag the visual here and drag it all out here to have a nice big visual. So X-axis will be the project name, and then we will have the start date, and we'll have a finish date as well. And we're going to just use the actual finish date and the actual start date here. And right away you see that it populates very nicely. And we can have a legend, and that legend can be, for instance, the source. And Lingaro doesn't directly change the color font of these segments, so we need to go into this little format icon here, and we're going to have a look at the legend. And here we can choose, for instance, to have the project for the web as being red, and it will show up nice just like this. Now one thing extra that the Lingaro Gantt chart has compared to the previous ones is that it has the option to add a milestone into the visual. And we're going to do that right away, where the commercial deadline is a nice little visual that we want to have specifically here. And we're going to click on deadline. And right away you see the little pyramids showing up. Sad to say that that has the same format as the other parts, and the font or the color format changed. So let's put that back where it belonged. But what is nice about this is that you get a direct link up to the visual, and you can see that this visual, this project has its deadline way past the actual finish date. So we're good here, and then we're not so good here and not so good here, which makes a lot of sense. And if you're not particularly interested in the source, such as project for the web or project online, you could obviously change the legend to being more specific. Let's change it to the project status. And let's have the project status tell us that everything that is just a color comes from project for the web, so we know that. We'll have this one being light green, then green will be super green, amber will be amber, and red will be super red. So right away we have a clearer understanding how our projects are progressing and which we should focus on. And I click on the amber, and it will show you only the amber projects. We can click on red, we can click on green, completed. This is a very nifty little Gantt chart, and I really like the way it interacts with my mouse. It tells me immediately what the date is. It tells me immediately on which row I'm active. So very, very useful. Let's see if it also allows me to create sub-levels. You see that I'm doing the formatting of the finish date in the date hierarchy. The visual doesn't need that, but I tend to find it more readable than doing that, than not doing that. So let's put back that legend for complete, for super green, for amber, and for red. Now I've noticed this happening a couple of times during my tests, where the Lingaro Gantt chart will not retain the legend color changes. At least it doesn't seem that it does that, because I have seen happening that if I change to the table data and get back to the Gantt chart by Lingaro, actually those changes have been worked through. So keep that in mind if you do change those legend values. They seem to have been put into place, but you might not see them directly. Another thing about the Gantt chart, about this Gantt chart visual, let's see if this this works, where we have a phase 1 completion between there, and a phase 2 and a phase 3 completion. And what you actually see happening is very, very nice, where in the visuals that actually have those values, you see that there is a nice separation in the different phases. I really, really like that, because this gives you a really nice overview, where in the pop-out or in the tooltip, you actually see those phase completions dates in there as well. So very, very nice. Let's switch between the two reports again and see if that visual, no, because because I changed the legend, it actually didn't retain the actual values. So let's see if it can cope with these granularity changes on the bar, and let's see if that legend actually holds up. So completed was green, light green, amber, and now you do see that that pops up very nicely. So yes, this actually works, which is very nice. Very nice, very nicely done by Lingaro. So more information can be found at their own website. And if you like this visual, it is free. So go ahead and download it and experiment with it. So next up is the As Timeline visual. And again, I put the website here on top, and you can add the visual just like I've shown you in the previous section by going into Get Visual, and I already have it in this file. So let me just pull this visual as a full screen. Well, not particularly full screen, but at least bigger. Right from the start, you see that there's more information here, and there's different information that the As Timeline requires you to enter. So we have the entity, we have a category, start date, end date, tooltips text, overlay. It has some more information that you can grab compared to the Lingaro visual. So as soon as we drag the task name in here, it shows up as more information. There's helpful elements with the custom visuals, YouTube channel, there's new features, there's new settings, there's a lot of information here, as well as a little link to give feedback or to get feedback. Click this element to access the site, which is actually the way that I found this little website here. Very nice little visual. So let's start building it up. So if you set the project name as being the entity and the category being your task name, you will get the information of that that project. And it's difficult to see, but the task name is actually behind the project name here. This is a very nice visual where every task has its own color. You might be able to just service the summary tasks instead of every task here, and then because the summary tasks have the same name, you would have a very limited view on your legend instead of every phase. So let's add some more information here, such as the phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 completions. And in the overlay, I might be interested in seeing that commercial deadline value here as well. So let's remove that. And as soon as I've done that, you will see that those 3 values here show up. It might be interesting to just have the project entity here. And what we see, so there's a stacked option, and that is very cool, where you have the option to stack data from your category level. Yes, so here is what I actually intended to have, where you have the different tasks within your project showing up. And because we have every task in our project tasks section, you do see a wide variety of colors popping up here. But in the end, you might only be interested in the phases. So you would have a table specifically only on phases, and that would show up just as nice as the Lingaro Gantt chart with the different colors on the different phases. So one other thing that I would like to share about the As Timeline is that you have the overlay, and the overlay is your progress bar on your projects. So let's grab that progress bar, and let's have that in here. And because we are on a project task level, we might want to limit that value here and only focus on the start and finish date of the project itself, giving us a nice little overview of how much progress we have made. As you can see, that there's a lot of things that you can do. Today bar, you can remove that one. Multi-select legend, showing that or not showing that. Entity separator line, making that visual a bit better. Entity separator line, you can even change that to be a lighter color as not to be too evasive or evasive. Entity separator line height, legend font size. There's a lot that you can change with the S timeline, and it is a very nice visual that I do hope you try out for yourself. Let me know what you think about this visual in the comments below. Consider hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel. I do videos every 2 weeks. So before we dive into Power BI again and having a look at the xViz Gantt chart, let's have a brief look at their website because they have a lot going on. And as soon as I start scrolling or navigating to the home page, you will probably see webinars popping up in the right side. At least I saw webinars popping up at the right side. Let's have a look at the Gantt Enterprise. Let's click on that one. And here is exactly the reason why this Gantt chart is special. It is not a free Gantt chart visual. But let's have a look. xViz Gantt chart has a pop-up as soon as it's free, and you don't see this the first time that you add the visual and you start working with that. But if you close that project, if you close that Power BI file and you open it up again, you'll see that pop up, and I'll be showing you that as well. So there's an individual license and there's a enterprise license as well, billed annually. So I'll leave it up to you to say if this is a lot of money or isn't a lot of money. But there is a lot of visuals and features that you can have here. There is a getting started guide, which doesn't tell you a lot about the visual, but then there is also a webinar that you can add. And I've looked at this visual and the webinar, and the webinar actually explains a lot more about that visual. So let's create something. So the Gantt chart by xViz has a very nice starting visual where you can click on the Explore and explore 15 plus additional custom visuals. But we're interested in creating that Gantt chart and just have a look at all these customizations that you can add in this visual. We're going to have a look at some of them. We're not going to do everything because that will just take too long. But we are going to look at, for instance, setting up the project as a task name, which is a task name. Well, it isn't a task name per se, right? But we have a start date and we have a finish date. We don't need to add duration, but you could add duration if you, for instance, only have a start date and a finish and a duration date. That is an option as well. So for projects that don't have a duration at all, a milestone immediately shows up, which is very nice, very nice. So we do have a progress bar in this visual. Let's add that. And right from the start, oh, that looks nice, right? And you can change that by going into the format and let me find it because there's so much options here. It's difficult to find the right options. Progress bar display, it currently shows up as a bar. You can have that as a bullet and then it looks more like it does in a Microsoft project where you have that bar, or well, where you have summary, let's see, where you have that bar inside the other bar. It's called a bullet for some reason. I don't know why. We can change chart options. We can change the text. We can change the chart type, which I'm not going to dive into, but in the webinar, they're actually talking about changing the Gantt chart into a roster chart. And what I mean with a roster chart is that you will have a bar specifically for a person. I typically use the Gantt chart for projects instead of people. So row height, you can change that to actually increase to 20, so that we have a nice little overview here. Let's dive into some specifics of tasks, where you have the option to have a start and a finish date. What we see happening here is that the top level actually changes into a nice summary task, which is very nice indeed. Now, I have seen on the website and in the webinar that they have the option to actually create predecessors and successors, but that actually requires you to have a separate table in which you have the connector type and the connected to values. And because those values aren't in store for the project online OData, it doesn't make sense for us to create it here. If you do have such a data source where you have the option to create a finish to finish or start to start or finish to start relationship between the tables, let me know and we can dive into that together maybe. But for me, it didn't make sense to create a situation for myself where I would fake the different dependencies. It does have that option. I haven't seen it, and I don't intend to use that right away because of the difficulty of recreating the dependency layer in a separate table. So heading back to milestones, we can actually add another milestone, which is the commercial deadline. If I add that to the milestone here, what happens here? What happened? So here you have the milestone that is added on each layer because we have the task layer. But I want to have that milestone only as a summary on the parent. Now, if I'm correct, I'm actually able to do that, where I have my milestone, allow milestone from date, yes, show as a marker, show in parent, yes. So here we have that as a parent, and so let's click on cancel here. As you can see, there is a lot that you can do here, and you will also see that annoying pop-up here. So if you do intend to work with the xViz Gantt chart visual, consider buying it because that visual will take up nearly a quarter of your screen at some points in time. It doesn't get any smaller. It just takes up a lot of your space. So if you are considering working with that, and I'm not an affiliate of xViz, but consider subscribing to it because it makes a lot more sense to have that visual clean, nice and clean. But we have just scratched the options of the xViz Gantt chart. We can also add, let me see, display category and display measures. In the display measures, you can, for instance, look at the project duration as being some kind of a measure that you can work with. Not particularly interesting here, but for instance, the project status can be shown here as being a display category. And we remove that other one. Here we see that this project is completed. It also has the 100% complete. We have an issue project, which is red, would make sense. There is also the URL option here. Let me add that one as well. So additional data can be added here. And with this additional data, you can change the format of those values. So let's click on that option here again, and you'll have 5 values here to actually work with. So one of them is the web URL, and we can click on add a new URL, and this will be the board URL, and we're going to base that on the URL, and we're only going to show an icon, and you can change that to a whole lot of different icons. So for now, let's change that, for instance, to a little spaceship, and let's change the color to being dark purple, just because we're allowed to do that. So as you can see, it didn't work. So let's head back to the report. Maybe it is a refreshing thing that needs to happen. Let's see, why didn't it show up? Where is my nice little spaceship? No, doesn't show up, which is strange. Board URL. Maybe I can use the project URL instead and just remove that one. Maybe it needs to be on the first location. Could be a trick. So let's go into web URLs, add a new URL. So the project URL is going to be based on a project, and it's going to be an icon, and it's going to be dice now, and it's going to be red. And I'm going to click on apply, and it shows up on some of them, but it doesn't show up on all of them, which is strange. Maybe someone can tell me what I'm doing wrong here. But it's nice that these dice do show up, and I tend to forget because there's so much that you can do with this. So zoom levels, I have no clue on what that does, other than that it gives you the option to turn it on or off. Let's turn it off for now. There's references. We can have a new reference. I don't know what that does. Oh, this is a reference line, which we can add. I remember now, you can call it today, and applies to the today date, reference color being red, and displaying that as a line, and we can even have it as a dashed line. And we have now got a today line, which is very nice. And I do see a useful attribute here where you can set a company-wide deadline, for instance, where in August we need to have all servers live, for instance. All servers need to, well, patched, for instance, patched. And why I'm typing this is because custom date, 1st of August. Oh, doesn't do typing? Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does. Now let's see if it accepts my Dutch way of typing. So let's have that as a dark blue line, and let's have it as a solid line. Let's see if it looks at January the 8th. No. And here you see that all servers need to be patched. We can open this one up, and we can actually put this into a higher level than the to-do date, than the today date, or lower level, for instance, therefore not mixing up with these two dates. So that reference date is very nice. You can use that for sure in your schedules. Then there's conditional formatting, and we can apply that to a whole lot of things. We can say, okay, well, we have a rule where we can have this looking into both parent and children. So a project name is the parent and the child name is obviously the task. We can have that as a status flag, or we can have that as a progress, sorry. And we can even have a little flag or another visual here. Format by rule, and the current rule is that we're looking into the project status, and if it is red, I would like to have that showing up as red as well. So let's have that rule applied, and here you see that these values are now red. And why does it show up on the progress bar? Well, that shows up on the progress bar because I actually said that it should be on the progress bar. You can also have it set to everything or just showing up in the data grid. So let's see how that changes. It doesn't show me a very nice little visual here, but we can set that back to being on the progress or just being on all. And let's see if that makes it clearer. Well, I would say having a look at the flag status here, as well as the red bar on progress, that makes the most sense to me. Let's add another rule that applies to progress, setting on the parent and being a flag status, where I will set an alarm clock, and this is indeed red, but a bit pinky red. It is when the project status is red, I will only see that little line. Where is it? Where is it? Where's my little pinky line? Nope, doesn't work. Doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? Because rule 1 is applied. Nope, rule 2 doesn't help. So you can just imagine me scrolling through all these values and all these options, and I'm no starting user for project and project online and the data that's behind it. And the way I'm struggling with this visual could only mean for me as an indicator that more people will struggle with working with this. The webinar was very useful, and there's data in the webinar that was shared that I haven't had time to dive into together with you. So if you're serious about a very cool, very extensive visual, such as the Gantt chart for xViz, be sure to look into that webinar. And I would even go as far as advising you having a one-on-one session together with one of the xViz guys for getting your Gantt chart visual just the way you want it. And I hope that for the paid version, that is actually included. But again, I'm not an affiliate of them, and I haven't contacted them directly. So looking into the format, there is a lot of options. You have the chart options, which again, you had the bullet in the progress bar. Fiscal year, you can have that starting somewhere. Hide blank, you have the option zoom button, which is a pro feature, which gives you the option to zoom in and zoom out. which is nice, which is very useful, which isn't included in the others. Symbol color. Nice, we can even change the symbol color. Ah, that's cool. So display categories, enable ID, which is useful for if you have that here. There's an ID title, there's an ID width, task name, title, name. Yeah, we can change that to project task, for instance. Width we can change, project status we can change. And there's some things that we can do with the data grid. We can have the I have seen that where you can alternate the rows for the parent and the child entities. Yeah, here is the border color for the parent. We can change that to being red, and for the child we can have that as blue, and we can even say something about the child track color being different for the different parents and children, where you can say, okay, well, parent fill color or parent track color or child track color. There's a lot of ways to visually change this. You can even change it for an individual project. So let's do that for the new stuff, which was my project that I used for the first project for the web. Let's make that super red. You see that just changed specifically for that project. So if you like this video and you want to see more of what I've done, you could head over to the previous video, which shared 2 Gantt chart visuals, or maybe learn 3 improvements on or how to interact with your Power BI visuals. With that, thank you very much for watching. Please consider subscribing and clicking on that like button.